I'm Josh Barrow, host of Left, Right, and Center, KCRW's weekly forum for civilized debate across the political spectrum. Today's news cycle demands more time for deeper analysis, so Left, Right, and Center is now a full hour every week. Subscribe and listen at kcrw.com/LRC.
LA has the largest jail system in the country.
You got people that been in jail just like one time in their life, can't get nothing because of whatever mistake they made.
I stole some ground turkey because I wanted to feed my family. We was hungry.
Off the Block. Stories tracing the path from city block to cell block and back. Find it now at kcrw.com or subscribe on iTunes.
From KCRW Santa Monica and KCRW.com, it's The Treatment. Welcome to The Treatment. I'm Elvis Mitchell. So I guess it was about 21 years ago this year that my guest, Molly Shannon, first came to our attention on Saturday Night Live, where she created characters, including one very familiar to KCRW listeners. I won't go into too many details, but yeah, good times.
I like your impression.
It's the only impression I can do. And she left, I guess, 15 years ago to pursue a terrific career in film and television. She made a great breakthrough when Mike White was here for the film Year of the Dog in 2007, her first big film in Sundance. She's back this year with the film Other People. First of all, Molly, it's so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here with you. What an honor for me.
Well, an honor for me because I guess I think of you as an actress in terms of somebody who approaches every role you played seriously. I mean, there's no sort of overspill where you let people know what they should think of the character, which can often be the case with actors who come from sketch comedy. Mm-hmm. There's this sort of thing where they let you know it's okay to judge what they're playing, and that's not something you've ever done, is it?
No, I think I always approach comedy from a dramatic point of view. Like, I consider myself a dramatic comedian. I never wanted to make fun of the comedy characters that I was doing, so I'd always think about what do they want and what does their heart want. So I approached it from a very serious point of view, more from like a real drama school point of view. Does that make sense?
It's funny you said what they want because the characters you play seem to want one thing so very much that it's almost like this exercise of will. They're going to make this. It's a great line, or purity of heart being the ability to will a single thing into being. And Mary Catherine is almost. You can see her creating this thing for her to be in her head. And your character in Year of the Dog, the same thing. She's creating this reality for herself. Yeah. And in Other People, she's willing herself through this most horrific of circumstances. And I think it's been called a dramedy, but I like to call it an emotional comedy rather than a dramedy because I think it's really funny, but there's a sense of reality that is a constant presence in the material. Yeah. And if you would sort of take a minute to explain to our listeners what Other People is about.
Other People is about a boy, played by Jesse Plemons, who moves back home to Sacramento, where he was born, to take care of his mother, who's dying of cancer. And he has just broken up with his boyfriend, but doesn't want to tell his mother. And he has to deal with Mom's life and her slowly slipping away, and also his father doesn't really accept the fact that he's gay, and so it's just these family struggles. And it's a beautiful story about also what mothers do for their children, and just coming back to his family when he's been away for a while.
But I do want to talk to you a little bit because this character, more than anything, is just determined to keep her presence in her son's life, and that's that knife of willpower that I find in so many of the characters that you play. Oh, wow. And I wondered if, as you were talking about the hunger almost that these characters that you play have, where that comes from for you, if you've been able to identify it, even going back to your days when doing sketch work, of just that determination that they all have.
That's such a sweet question. It's funny, I actually just came from a school tour with my son, and there were a couple kids raising their hands, half raising it, and I remember thinking, God, that's so weird. I remember when I would raise my hand when I was little, I was like, please pick on me. I would really stretch and make sure they saw me. And I would be like one of those people me. So I think it's, my mother died in a car accident when I was really little. And I think I have a strong sense of urgency, of never knowing how long you have have with somebody. You never know how long somebody's life will be. So there's like a sense of like a little bit of anxiousness and urgency with like you never know, something like that. So I think, like, to answer it for Mary Catherine Gallagher, I think she's just like, kind of accident prone and anxious and wants so much and wants it now, and maybe not knowing if there's going to be enough time, so she wants it now. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
I'm trying to figure it out while I'm answering the question.
No, because I guess I wondered if there was any deliberation in this, just because you say urgency, but I never feel a sense of these characters being rushed, because they all kind of take their time.
Oh, that's good.
You think about it, because people who have a sense of urgency, there's almost this jittery quality to them.
Yeah.
And there's almost this preternatural calm in some of these people that you play, but they are also determined to will these things that they want into their lives.
Wow.
And I just found that fascinating, because it's both kind of comedic, just because there's so much focus and so much concentration in these people.
Interesting.
And that's, for me, where a lot of the comedy comes from. And I would even say that's the same case in Other People, where we can see as physically she's losing control of things. There's almost nothing left but a light in her eyes that will not go out.
Wow, that's so sweet. Thank you. Well, that's really sweet. And I think she just has these things that she wants to say to her son and to her daughters and to her husband, and she wants to be remembered. And she knows her life is being cut short. She knows before them, she's slipping away, and she has things she's got to tell them before she dies, And it's just so beautiful. And I think she's just a mother till the very end,
My guest, who raised her hand as if she didn't realize we were on the radio, is Molly Shannon. She's starring in the film Other People.
Did I raise my hand, Elvis?
Me, as you were doing the demonstration.
But I'm the only one here.
That's right. That's right. This isn't really happening, Molly. This is just your imagination. This show doesn't actually exist, as I've learned for many years. But I just wonder, as you got started in figuring out what you were going to do as an actress, if you were just aware what concentration does and how that makes you stand out in a piece at all. For example, as a kid watching movies, because there is a phenomenon I've thought of as being movie star concentration, where sometimes you know the star is just because there's a kind of look.
Yeah.
There's a kind of understanding that if you are just really fixed on something, that we will pay attention.
That's really interesting. Laura Dern said something great to me when we were shooting Enlightened. We were talking about acting, and she goes, I think the only thing you can really do is just be in the moment. You can't plan too much out. The greatest thing you could do is just to be in the moment. I always think about that. So I try to think of that when I'm acting.
Is that what you were doing in Other People? Because we should say, too, that the film is written and directed by someone who experienced this. So it's a memoir for him. Yes. And I just wonder how much you felt you could make this yours as compared to trying to let in what he wanted to bring to the screen of his own story.
That's such a great question. Yeah, Chris Kelly, who is our amazing writer-director, he didn't want to be so strict with it like it was a docudrama or something. But we did talk about his mother a lot, and I spoke to her best friend, and he was like such an amazing guide for me in terms of talking about, at this point she was kind of like this, and her voice was going out. So he really guided me through the different points of shooting it, because we would shoot at different points in her health. Like sometimes she was really off chemo and doing okay, and then on chemo and sicker. So it was a little technical in terms of where she was physically, how she felt, how tired she was. So he really guided me, but he didn't want to be so strict, like, that's not how my mother would do it. It wasn't anything like that. It was more having her essence. And but then, of course, it was so great having him there, because it's his story, and so I could ask him any questions. So I don't know. I think it felt very loose.
But given what you just said, though, that there had to be a kind of plan for this, because I'm guessing you did not shoot in order, right?
No, we didn't shoot in order.
So having to do these things where one day it could be at the beginning of the diagnosis, and the next day you could be at the end of it.
Exactly.
Having to work out a performance like that, because it is, and this almost to me gets back to concentration, such a physical performance, even though it's not physical in the way we would expect.
Right.
But it's all about command of your body as an actor, isn't it?
Yes, Elvis. It really was command of your body. And It was interesting because I've never done anything like the very last scene where she is really like wants to give up and is saying, I really can't fight anymore and I've been trying so hard. And I was so worried about that very last scene where she's kind of whispering and giving him advice, not to give away the movie. But I remember being really worried about it. And I've never done anything like that in my life. She's so weakened and and she can't speak that well. And I remember thinking, wow, I have never done this. And I'm resting on Jesse Plemons' shoulder. And it was the strangest, hardest, acting experience because I couldn't use anything that I'm used to using in other ways, like my hands. I use a lot to express myself, and my face.
Or even the posture of your characters. I noticed that so often. Yeah. They'll sit like in Year of the Dog. She was almost leaning forward a little bit. Yeah. But still, there was so much sort of in your face and in your that sort of thing where we could see that she's been whittled away, but she hasn't quite given up yet. Aww. There's a determination. Again, for me, I know I've said it's a physical performance, and it is, but there's so much in the eyes in this performance.
Wow. Yes, Elvis, thanks so much. Yeah, there is so much in the eyes. Like when she's looking at her daughter and she puts on her 70s dress when she's really sick and not doing well at all, several days before her death, and she's looking and she feels confused and kind of spaced out, but she sees her daughter and she's just like, I think she sees that these moments are going to pass away, that she's not going to be there for her daughter's wedding. And so you're right, it was just in the eyes and in the look and the heart and the love that she feels and that beaming out. So it was just such an honor to play that and think about what she must have felt like.
What was your first conversation with Chris like? Because he's, for those who don't know, he's an SNL writer, and we don't tend to think of emotional depth.
Yes. Well, Chris Kelly just became the head writer with Sarah Schneider, the co-head writer of Saturday Night Live, and he is responsible for some of the biggest and funniest sketches that many people will know, like the Adele sketch and many, many more. And Chris is a young writer. He's, I forget exact age, 31, 30. I don't want to say his wrong age, but he's very young. But I told Chris, I go, it's really brave that you wrote such a vulnerable emotional comedy from your heart. And I said, there are a lot of writers who wouldn't have the bravery to do that. Like, you really put it out there, So I just admire that he did that, that was his first feature, like such a vulnerable, kind of brave, open, honest portrait of a family dealing with death.
But I guess I want to get back to, too, your first conversation with him, just because as you're talking with somebody about playing something that's so different from what you've done before, not just in terms of the tone of the piece, but also in terms of what the character is doing. She's not signaling to us with her body what she's feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a much subtler performance. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that was something that you found really attractive just because it was different from what you've done before.
Yeah, I did find it really different, especially the scene where I smoked too much medical marijuana. And, Chris would let me improvise and kind of make it up. Then I'm like, oh, right, she's not physically strong enough for me to do stuff that I would normally be able to do. She's weakened and she's stoned out of her mind and she's being funny and she's having a nice night. She's sick, but she is cracking up. And, so it was like finding that level of like what I would do normally as a comedian to make it funny. I could do handstands, I could have flipped and danced around that room, but she's really sick and she's stoned. So it was just finding that place in between that's much less than what I would normally do. And Chris was so great with letting us improvise and kind of figure that out and knowing what to use. Like, oh, that's a little too much. I think this is better. But also letting me be silly and free in the performance to kind of find it. As opposed to just sticking to the lines, he would let me kind of play with it and shoot it and be silly and add to the lines. And there's nothing that helps more in like a comedic moment when you can be childlike and have the time where the camera's rolling, where you can fiddle around with it a little bit to like find a real place with it.
That's probably a great place to take a break. Don't do too much medical marijuana in the interim. My guest is Molly Shannon. She's the star, and she truly is the star of Other People. It's the treatment. There's more to come.
Listen to the Rhythm Planet podcast to explore music from all corners of the globe: Brazilian, European, African, and tropical Latin. Rhythm Planet is a state of mind. Listen at kcrw.com/rhythmplanet or on KCRW's app.
Welcome back. It's The Treatment. We have more advice from my guest, Molly Shannon. She's the star of the film Other People. You were just saying during the break that there's a story.
Yeah,
about
my
your
dad, when he was dying, he was, on lots of morphine and he couldn't really speak well, but he had advice to give my sister Mary and I before he died. And he would take a breath of oxygen, like, and then speak. I had just done a small part in this movie, Analyze This, and he really thought that was really good with Billy Crystal, and he liked that. So he took a breath of oxygen, giving me his last bit of advice. And he was like, small parts. And my sister and I were like, yes, small parts. And then he took another breath of oxygen, and he was like, in movies. And we were like, in movies. And then he took another breath. And then he was like, analyze this. And we were like, analyze this. And then he died. That was his last bit of advice on his deathbed. Do not underestimate good small parts in movies, analyze this.
Nothing wrong.
Thank you, Jim Shannon. Because he was like, you have to get the big parts, but good small parts are very good too.
He's right.
Okay.
And you got to work with another light of improvisational comedy, Harold Ramis, on that movie.
Yes, and he was amazing. Yeah, and that was a small, funny part. There are a lot of amazing small parts in Other People. I always tell Chris, I love the scene where he bumps into the kid in the grocery store who asks him about his family situation, and he's wants to talk about coming out. And I love, there's so many funny little scenes in the movie.
It's interesting too, because there's a life inside the house, then the life that he has when he has to get out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I've got to get out of here, but I've got to go back. So there's this sense of obligation, but also this need. But how do you balance those two things? Because when Jesse's character is out of the house, he's a different person. You can almost see that long walk up to the house again, where this force of nature, who he's got these conflicting feelings about, is dissipating before his eyes. I mean, that's a big part of the movie, too, is watching it through his eyes and just sort of seeing him watch this hurricane that has run his life winding down before him.
Yeah. It really is just so fantastic. And I love the scene with the fight that he has with his father about how his father has never allowed his boyfriend to be invited home, and he finally says, he can come. He's like, finally? And that is one of my favorite scenes.
Well, it's interesting because for those who have seen Fargo, we can get a chance to see what Jesse's range is as an actor. And just watching the two of you, basically, he's your captive audience.
Yeah.
And I guess I wondered when you first met Jesse, what you guys talked about, because it's a lot to play, but it's also a lot of information to give, because you have got to suggest, because the movie's really about suggesting a lot of these things, suggest the relationship that's gone back over his entire life. Right. So what was your first meeting with him like?
My first meeting, we met for coffee at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, I think. And we just talked as friends and talked about just personal stuff. And got to know one another over coffee for a couple hours. So that was really all. And then the first day of shooting, we did this really intimate scene in bed where I looking at the bulletin board, and we're crying, and, and I say, I'm sorry I dropped you when you were a baby, and I'm sorry I was so mean when you came out. And it's just a really sad, intense scene. That was day one. So that's how strange acting is. I was like, this is incredible. I don't really know. I've only gotten to know Jesse a little bit, and we have this intimate mother-son scene in bed where I'm just talking about that I'm not scared that I'm dying, and I'm lying because I am petrified, and you don't see my face. It's just a beautiful scene, but I love doing it, and it's what I love about acting.
What did you say to Chris when he cast you? Did you know right away he wanted you for it, or how did that work out?
I did. I heard their financing came together really quickly, and then they were like, we really need an answer. They offered me the script, sent it to me, and they go, we need to know pretty quickly. So I read the script in my bedroom, and I really cried when I read it. I felt like it was so funny and so full of heart that I felt like it was like a heart leaping out at me, bursting. It really made me cry. And I called him right away, honestly, 2 minutes later, and I said, I would love to do your movie. And he was like, really? Okay. And he was on his way to Washington, D.C. for a big political dinner he was writing. I think he might have been, or just maybe he was just attending.
Was it for the correspondence dinner?
It was the correspondence dinner, yes. He was on his way on a train that day, and we just had a really exciting conversation. And I was so overjoyed that I went running because I had to calm myself down because I felt so excited that I went and I listened to a Miley Cyrus song, We Can't Stop, and I played it over and over and over again. And I was like, I'm going to be in a movie. This was like my fantasy about the movies, That is truly what I did, Elvis. I had to run myself around my neighborhood like a dog to calm myself down.
Well, if I were playing Miley Cyrus in my head, I'd be running too. But anyway, it's just connected Miley Cyrus and my guest, Molly Shannon. It's the treatment. We're talking about the film Other People in which she stars. And the film that you've got to star in between Year of the Dog and this have been movies that have made such big demands on you as a performer. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about liking that thing of being thrown in the middle of something and having to make an impression, which is so much of what SNL is about week after week. Yeah. Debuting a new character, having to let everybody know who this person and what this person was right away. But then there's a slower reveal in Year of the Dog than here. We get the information here kind of right away. Knowing it's going to be you, I'm thinking, well, how is she going to do this? Is this just going to be some big, broad comedy that satirizes this thing? Or is it going to be the kind of thing we often see where a comic actor is trying to do something serious and is too sentimental?
Oh, that's interesting.
And it wasn't that. I mean, this real person walks into the room. Yeah. Also, this person who realizes she's been the author of her family's narrative and that she knows exactly how they're going to react whenever she speaks. Yeah. But again, for me, it was so much about even the first time we see her, we can see there's kind of a loss of power and his reaction to her.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you prepare yourself for something like that where we're meeting this person we've heard, we kind of understand who she is, but there's just all this grief in this room.
Yeah, there's all this grief in this room. I don't know. I think, I felt so respectful to Chris of really wanting to do a good job. And then I've also had experience losing people to cancer, close friends of mine, my own father. And so I tried to put that in there and my own mother and his mother and just combine everything I know together and thinking about how she must have felt. And that she was willing to fight to the end of her life, that she just would do anything to fight for more time with her family. And how hard she fought and what she put her body through to just buy more time. It's just I think, God, her perspective on life must have been so different. She's just trying to get a few more months to make it to his improv show in New York or for this wedding or to see these things that people who take life on earth for granted, that her whole perspective is completely different. I just tried to think about what that must have felt like for her.
Yeah, but I guess I'm only asking you about that first scene because you're just laying there. Yeah. And all this is going. When did you guys shoot that in the schedule? What was it? A couple of days?
We shot that was more toward the end.
Okay, so it's a little bit easier to do because you just said what your first scene was. That's the first thing you shot with Jesse. But I just wondered how you can do that kind of thing. How you prepare for that? Yeah. Because I just think about all the death scenes I've seen in movies, and I've always wondered what it's like to be the person. I never got a chance to ask anybody this before, so it's kind of a question I've had in the back of my head for a long time. What is it like to be the object of all that kind of emotion?
That's wild. It felt like it was the most surreal thing, but it did give me the giggles a little bit. I know this isn't professional. Well, Bradley Whitford tells the story. He's sobbing over me. They're all crying, and they were shooting it in a one-shot that I started laughing. I could not stop laughing because I knew I wasn't supposed to breathe, and I had to be really still. And I'm thinking, this is so strange. I have people, I feel Bradley's weight, and he is sobbing on my chest, and I burst out laughing, and then they all had tears, and then they all started laughing, and it was actually this great funny moment that actually relieved all of us, but I kind of, I felt bad, but they were like, what? They're crying and laughing, and it was great. And then we started to shoot it again, but it kind of took away the tension of the heaviness of the scene. So it actually ended up being helpful, but I felt bad that I laughed. But it was just, it was, I've never had an experience like that before.
I've always wanted to ask somebody that. Yeah. And I guess I wanted to just because you talked about this great piece of advice your dad gave you about doing these great small parts. So when you get a part like this, that is the center of a movie, that's the linchpin that everything is built around. Is as much the foundation of the movie as her character is the foundation of this family. What's the first thing you say to yourself? Besides, I got to listen to Miley Cyrus. After you listen to the Miley Cyrus, what's the next thing you say to yourself about doing it?
I think I say, what would Charlize Theron do? No.
A Chanel commercial, probably.
No, a neighbor of mine said, well, are you going to hire a coach? And she made me really nervous. I was like, And then I thought,
A coach?
what would Charlize Theron do?
And what would she do?
She would hire a coach.
And did you?
No, the truth is I really tried to be in the moment. And I think I did think about, God, I wonder if I should, she was definitely thin and wasting away physically. So I did think about that initially. Like I thought, maybe I should just drop a little weight so I can feel a little weaker. But I don't like to worry too much about that. And we had an amazing costume designer who gave me clothes that were bigger to have that effect. And so I think I really just tried to talk to Chris a lot and be in the moment. And speaking to his mother's best friend, Bonnie, was really helpful because I really had a sense of her values and what she thought when the cancer came back and what she thought about her kids and her husband and her marriage and her house and just everything. I talked to her for hours and it was really helpful. Like I felt like I really had a strong sense of her. So I really did my research thoroughly that way and then combined it with other personal things from my own life and just tried to be in the moment.
That's funny because that's one of the things I was thinking in watching of that, and unfortunately having lost friends to cancer myself, that when you hear the words remission, you kind of think, I hope it's actual remission because in so many cases, it comes back.
Yeah.
I almost think that some part of this was you're doing this because it was unlike anything you'd ever done before, and that's what drew you to it.
Yeah, it was unlike anything I've ever done. And then also seeing I had a young mom friend go through that, and her life was just kind of living scan to scan. And I thought, oh my God, that's so stressful. She's a mom just like me. She's dropping her kids off at school. She works, and she has to go get her blood scans, And so she'd go, cross your fingers, say a prayer, and she's like this lively, beautiful, vibrant mom. And she looks so healthy. And I'm like, I can't even imagine the stress of that, And I would visit her too when she was getting chemo and she was so lively and I'd bring her magazines and she seemed so alive with beautiful manicures and she was so pretty and I'm just like, I can't believe she's dying. This is so complicated. And I think seeing her and my dad and talking to Chris, these are complicated. There's all kinds of complicated feelings. You can feel like sad, grateful, living truly one day at a time, angry. It's a complicated time. So I hope I tried to put that in the work and really, think about that this is a complicated mother and wife,
Sure.
Going through an emotional thing.
No, of course. But again, for me, what the through line that runs through so many of your characters is this is somebody who demands to be seen.
Oh, yeah.
Right back to your raising your hand in the first half of the show. And I wonder if he chose you because he knew about this almost supernatural concentration that you're capable of. Because it's what's shocking about seeing Year of the Dog is that it really registers on the big screen in a way that's almost kind of off-putting because there's something really powerful about it. And I was there at that first screening at Sundance. What was that like for you to see the movie in that way, to see other people that way?
It was amazing, Elvis. And I know you brought up Mike White, too. I don't know why Chris chose me, but I do know that a lot of people saw me in Mike White's movies, and they're like, I loved you in Year of the Dog, or I loved you in Enlightened. And I really give Mike so much credit. He's my good friend. He wrote dramatic parts for me, and so I really credit Mike for kind of helping me. And I know Chris loved Mike's work and saw that. So I think that really did help them see that I could do stuff that's a little more serious, too, with comedy. But then Chris also wanted comedians in these parts because he didn't want it to be so heavy-handed that he wanted comedy people. So your question was, seeing it at Sundance, I saw it for the first time at the Eccles Theater at Sundance. I hadn't seen it. I loved it. It's just, I thought it was so beautiful and funny, and I could have seen it before, but I really like seeing it with a big audience, and it's just all the reason I ever wanted to be an actress. It was just like people were crying, and it was like to move people like that is the whole reason why I want to act. I try to remember that it's not about me, that it's like extending yourself, and that's it when it's at its best. Everybody can get kind of selfish and self-centered, but when I'm feeling the most joyous and happy is when I extend myself and people feel stuff from my work. It gives me like such joy that I feel like if I were to let it all in, I could just cry, like it really does make me so happy.
We're out of time, Molly. I can't thank you enough for doing this.
Thank you, Elvis.
My pleasure. My guest, who is just extending her arms again on radio, is Molly Shannon. She's starring in the film Other People, a recording engineer here at NPR West is Leo Delacula. The show is mixed by Kat Yor. It's edited by Blake White, who's the associate producer. I'm not going to extend anything. It's The Treatment. To catch up on past episodes of The Treatment, go to KCRW.com or listen on your smartphone with KCRW's mobile apps, or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The treatment is produced and distributed by KCRW Santa Monica.